Welcome to Ecologic for the month of August 2017. Look like we're in the soup again. Last year at this time we were dealing with a major flood from precipitation roaming in from the Gulf of Mexico, and we're facing the same thing. We got another 3 or 4 days of rain. We are looking at a big jump in the Bayou Vermilion level in the last 2 hours. It's turned backwards and went up almost 4 feet in about an hour after a 2-inch rain. Hey, we're fortunate to have with us Donald Sagrera, who is the executive director of the Teche Vermilion Freshwater District, which involves, I guess, at least 6 parishes, but funded by 4. So, Donald, share with us the history of that concept and how it works and what parishes are supporting it and so forth. By the way, it's been deemed as a very successful water quality improvement for the Vermilion and the Teche, as well as providing fresh water for the farmers of that region.
Thank you. Thank you, Harold, and thanks for having me on the show, and I'm very happy to be here. To give a little bit of history of the Teche Vermilion Freshwater District, I guess we could start off by looking at the watershed itself. The Teche Vermilion watershed, we like to think of it as having a northern part and a southern part, and Highway 190 being the divider between the two halves of the watershed. The northern half of the watershed extends all the way up to Alexandria, and it's bordered on the west side by high ground, and it's bordered on the east side by the protection levee of the Atchafalaya floodway. On the southern half of the watershed, if we say it starts at Highway 190, say around Opelousas, and goes all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So this is the part of it that the Teche Vermilion Freshwater District is mostly involved with. Years ago, the watershed was fed by water from the Atchafalaya River through the connection with the many bayous that flow through the watershed. The main one being Bayou Catawba, which connected directly to the Atchafalaya River. And then it would, in Port Barre, Bayou Catawba feeds Bayou Teche, which then distributes water into Bayou Vermilion, as well as what we call Bayou Ami. So the whole southern part of the watershed is controlled, or the flow was furnished by water that was from Bayou Catawba. Well, we're having a serious flood event right now. There has been serious flood events over the years. One of the biggest ones in our country's history was the Great Flood of 1927. And this whole area of the watershed was impacted very seriously. So Congress, with the request from local officials,
From Missouri on down, they built the massive, I think the 1928 Flood Control Act authorized the big levee system.
Right. Following that flood, Congress passed the Flood Control Act of 1927, and this is the act that resulted in the establishment of the basins, the floodways, and the protection levees that we have throughout our area. Whenever the levee was installed on the west side of the floodway, it cut off the flow of water from the Atchafalaya River to Bayou Catawba. So therefore, that cut off the flow of water to the southern part of the watershed. So this happened in the late 20s, early 30s, when all of this came about. So it resulted in a lack of the flow of water. We didn't have adequate water. We didn't have enough of a flow to keep saltwater intrusion from taking place. You had low oxygen problems with fish kills, and there was also, dry years especially, a lack of sufficient water to navigate. So as a result of all of this, the parishes in the watershed got together and began to request help. And the Louisiana Department of Public Works in the 1950s conducted a study to find out, to address the problem of the lack of sufficient water, as well as the quality, the poor water quality that we had in the watershed. As a result of that study, it was determined that the cutoff of flow from the Atchafalaya River to Bayou Catawba was the reason for the problem. So the federal government, as a way to mitigate for the putting in the floodways and protection levees, approved the funding of the Teche Vermilion Freshwater District project. And in order for this to happen, the federal government required that a local district be created to run and to raise funds to run the project and to keep it going, as well as to operate it. So the state of Louisiana created the Teche Vermilion Freshwater District in 1966, and the district consists of 4 parishes: Lafayette Parish, Iberia Parish, St. Martin Parish, and Vermilion Parish. There are other parishes that are affected. St. Landry Parish is one, as well as St. Mary receives some of the water. But the federal government agreed to put in a pumping station that would pump water from the Atchafalaya River into Bayou Catawba, and therefore restore that flow of fresh water that existed before the levees were put in. So this was something that it took the problem, the recognition of the problem, say from the late 20s to 30s, to the study that the Department of Public Works did in the 50s, to the creation of the freshwater district in 1966, and then the proof that the district would be able to fund the project. So the district had to call for a millage to have the funding so that the federal government would be able to.
So they could pay the electric bill to run the electric pumps.
This is correct.
That's the main thing.
This
And
is
somebody has to run it, turn them on, and manage the whole system. And y'all manage also gates that are connected and part of the system, right?
This is
Teche
correct.
Canal Gate, and of course the gates, and then you have monitoring stations, which are a big help in, dealing with high water, low water, and everything else, and that's manned by your operation. At your station, you have gauges, and I guess you bound have gauges on Bayou Catawba.
Yes.
And the Barpit Canal, and
Yes.
So y'all are a major part of managing the water currently in the Teche Vermilion system.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Over the years, we have upgraded the way we do this. Currently, we have cameras at some of the gauges that we cannot get the readings from on the internet. And of course, some of the gauges that are throughout the watershed, we can get the readings on the internet. But to back up a little, the federal government approved the funding to put in this project. And originally, the project cost $40 million. And this was in thinking in terms of money back in the mid-'70s. So
Wow.
today,
You could
this
double
$40
that
million
now.
project is worth about over $100 million. But the project was designed by the Corps of Engineers, and it was built by the Corps of Engineers.
And
once
completed in '82, wasn't
it
it?
was completed in 1982.
Yeah.
And then once everything was built, then the project was turned over to the local district to operate it and to and to be able to replace and repair any of the features of the project. So the federal government required that the district agree that they would not go back to the federal government for money to maintain or to replace equipment. So we used the millage that the voters approved to keep a fund for replacement and repair of equipment.
So you have an operational fund, and then you have a reserve.
We have a reserve for replacement
Right.
and repair. And by the way, the project, the pumping station and the features of the project came about, we started pumping in 1982. So we are now getting to the point where we are actively upgrading equipment, replacing equipment. We have replaced some pumps, but we are having to use that reserve at this time to replace and repair, do the things that the reserve was set up for.
And weren't you all doing some repairs to the drainage connection, the under road culverts and all that kind of stuff? Weren't y'all making some repairs to that too?
Correct. This is one of the really major repairs that we have going on right now. It's called the State Canal Siphon, and this is the only way that the water that we furnish to the watershed can pass under the State Canal, which is a major drainage canal in that area. So the commissioners elected to, at this time, it's 35 years old, and nothing has ever been done to it. So in order to be able to repair it, we need a way to pass water under the State Canal during that repair. So we are presently working on what we call the State Canal Siphon Project, which is about a $7 million project. And this will add a second siphon to pass our water under the State Canal. And the main reason for it is to have a backup to the existing siphon so we can repair it if something happens to it.
Wow. It's an interesting complex, and it's one that's been very successful, and one that has allowed y'all to very well manage the funds that come to you. And of course, some of that is how much is nature requiring you to pump, and how much is nature delivering where you don't need to pump. And the last, I guess, couple of years, nature's been very generous. So when you have a flood coming down, we don't do pumping.
Correct, Harold. That's correct. The whole principle of the pumping is to hold the level of Bayou Catawba at a certain level. Right now, it's 17.63 feet above sea level. And if that water is furnished by rainfall, then we don't have to run the pumps. If we go through a period with insufficient rainfall, then we will start pumps to hold the elevation at that level. We have a capacity of running 4 pumps, which at times we have had to run 4 pumps. Usually that happens in the fall of the year.
When the water gets real low.
And when the water gets real low. Of course, like you said, this year we way below average on the amount of pumping that we've had to do, because the Bayou Catawba has been held at that level by rainfall runoff instead of us having to pump. For example, before this event, and another thing that we can do too is and we do monitor projected rainfall several days out. Like,
right,
for example, for this event, we were able to accurately.
You're not going to have to pump for a while.
Yeah, we knew that this was coming.
Yeah.
So we stopped pumping about 5 days ago, and actually Bayou Catawba is below where it's before. Say this morning it was about 1.5 feet below what it would. Yeah, below the 1763. So between us and the Corps, we allowed it to drop so that it would be below what it needed to be to have a little area to catch some of the initial runoff.
You had mentioned a couple of weeks ago that one of your people had thought that the part of the test from Leonville to Port Barry was a canal, and took the liberty of doing the research on it. It is indeed a canal. It shows on a state map, an 1829 state map, proposed excavation to aid navigation, the state land office map. And then the 1861 Union maps show the canal. The earlier maps don't show it at all. They show a ditch that kind of went towards Port Barry, but it's a coulee. It's not anything that is very small, but it does show up, but it's not at all, and it meandered all over the place. So the current stretch is almost, has a slight bend of it, but you can see it's a canal. And the old maps show the Bayou Teche going to Washington and going past Washington on the south side. It never did intersect Catawba. It goes up to Lake Chico. A branch of it, the Lake Chico drains a branch of it. And it's on the current map, it's called Bayou Coron. But Bayou Coron on the old original maps was only 2 miles long between Bayou Catawba and Bayou Teche. And I paddled in there many years ago, but I went into it about 2 weeks ago just to look at it again, and Bayou Coron had been dredged. Now when, who knows, but clearly there's spoil banks all along it, so the real source of the Bayou Teche is not Port Barry, as we all have always thought, that was a man-made connection. And it's kind of interesting, you look at Catawba, and that was a big waterway, large. And it received water from Bayou Coron, from Bayou Cocodrie, Bayou Buff, the Buff-Cocodrie Drainage Canal along I-49, and then it received water from Bayou Rouge, Bayou de Glaise, Yellow Bayou. There's about 8 bayous all flow into Catawba. And Catawba is only about 20 miles long, maybe a little longer. And that's all been altered and changed mainly by the levee system. They built the levee system, and all those Bayou Rouge, Bayou de Glaise did originally flow into the Chapelwire just like by Catawba. But now it flows into the Barper Canal, which flows into Catawba. Right. So Catawba is a big receiving water body, and it's amazing now. We expect all the water from Catawba to go down the man-made part of Bayou Teche. And if I was guessing, they probably dredged that, probably as we measured, it's 100 feet. And it was 9 feet deep when the water's at 17 and a half at its deepest point in the middle. So imagine this dredge capacity was 100 by 10, it's that history, I think, is an important thing if we're going to look at how we resolve the floodwaters. And the parishes now, with the help of Guy Cormier and Bill Fontenot and Monique Boulay, and a lot of people are pulling in the Lafayette folks, Mayor President Robidor, all these people are pulling together to look at this flood issue in the Vermilion Teche watershed. And some of the numbers are astounding. FEMA paid damages on like 3,900 homes in the watershed. And there's a lot of home damage they didn't pay. People had insurance, one's reading another, they didn't participate in FEMA benefits. But they point out that of those that they compensated, about 40% had less than a foot of water in them. So I think for the first time, a part of the country is saying, well, you can raise the houses a foot, which is really tough and very expensive, or you can look at lowering the water levels. and can we lower the water levels in a similar rain event? And you look at the Bay Vermilion, and it's got for a half a mile, it's only 2 feet deep, and I think that's what's contributing to going the wrong direction. And then you look at, a lot of development, a lot of water's pouring into the Cypress Island swamp. And that's a small swamp, it's only about 20,000 acres, has limited capacity, because its elevation is +7. So you have a couple of little lakes in there, but they're very, very small in acreage. And so that carrying capacity between the Teche Ridge and the Coteau Ridge, it's a natural bowl, is limited. And so I think St. Martin Parish is looking at the possibility of vacating that water south into the Jodé Canal, which would end up in Lake Foss Point, in the Teche, Lake Foss Point. And Lake Foss Point is enormous. It's where the Corps, I think, originally intended that water to go. And one computer model done in 1993 by Mark Wingate, who is now the chief civil servant employee in New Orleans, and he's right next to the colonel in management status, so to speak, and he did that model. And he showed just doing that would lower stages on the Vermilion 6 to 8 feet. And so that would make a lot of difference for Vermilion Parish, and of course Lafayette, the Youngsville area, and of course everything that surrounds Cypress Island, the area around Lake Martin, all that area, all towards Spanish Lake, all that region that can't go underwater, it's kind of low. But all the way north, because that high water is affecting water levels on the Vermilion all the way to Orneville. And you got a whole low area between Orneville and Sunset that those houses stay underwater for 30 or 40 days with this past August flood. So that one portion of it, dredging the Vermilion and letting water out of Cypress Island, would be a big help. And there's a ridge, right, as part of the old UL farm, that they would have to punch through and connect it to existing canals, but that's only about a half a mile. So that's hopeful that alone would lower water stages in parts of St. Landry, Iberia, St. Martin, and Lafayette, and perhaps have an impact on Vermilion, because if you lower stages in Lafayette 6 to 8 feet, that's lowering it in Vermilion also, Vermilion Parish, because Abbeville flooded a lot of homes in this past August flood.
Yeah. This is the good thing about the parish presidents getting together to pool their efforts to solve the problem, because, like they say, one thing, you do something in one parish may affect another parish. So this is the big reason for the
Absolutely.
coalition.
See if we can answer. You on there? Can we help you?
Well, I can't hear you. Your mics may not be on. Other stations are very loud, but I'm not hearing you at all.
All right, and
Well,
we'll get it turned up there. Our director can
All right.
hear that. Thank you for calling in, Art. Appreciate it.
I'd like to hear what you got to say.
Is
Thanks,
this,
Chip. I don't know if that's the mic. You got it turned up? Okay, good. Okay. So we have, and then the state and FEMA have recognized the parishes all pulling together with a plan to go forward. You know, that's the issue. Can stages be lowered? And if they can be lowered, shame on us for not doing it, because the cost, just in the Teche Vermilion, the homes that FEMA dealt with, which they figured was about half of the homes that were impacted, was $357 million. And 40% of those had less than a foot of water. So you do the math, you know, you're looking at $180 million you would save had we lowered the stages 1 foot.
Agreed.
And I think the parish presidents, to their credit, are recognizing that and realizing how important it is to pull together. And it's not just homes, you know, it's crops, it's hayland, it's cattle, it's, you know, has enormous impacts, businesses that are closed and that, you know, often people don't have the insurance they should have, and so they get flooded out and they can't afford to rebuild. And so it has something like 40% of the homes in the East Baton Rouge, Livingston Parish area, 40% of the businesses won't reopen. Just hit an economic blow that they can't recover from, or if they had insurance, they figure, well, I'll take the insurance and shut down their business. So it's had enormous impact beyond just flooded homes.
One of the things that the parish presidents are doing now, and if you attend some of the meetings that they have, the Acadiana Planning Commission has been putting together a lot of the statistics that you were just referring to about the amount of economic loss that the area suffers every day that we are not producing.
You can imagine, you know, Highway 90 was closed for a week, Highway 14, 182, virtually nearly all the roads in the region were closed. Well, that stops business. It stops people from going anywhere. You know, it stops everything. And so floods we can always have as we see this event unfolding in Houston and the surrounding area. Wow, what an impact we can have. Houston has 5 million people. You know, you could easily probably have 300,000 or 400,000 homes underwater, just in Houston. And, you know, does that disrupt business, disrupt, you know, families, and, you know, children are impacted because they think it's going to happen again, and, you know, just as people here. And I think that's what's encouraging our political leaders to move forward, is that if we can make it better, we, by gosh, need to make it better. And just like these figures on by Vermilion, you know, that shows it went up 4 feet in an hour, and at the same time, you're looking at it, the river was going downstream until this rain event, and now it's moving backwards. It was moving downstream at less than 1,000 cubic feet per second, and now it's turned around and it's moving north at 3,000 cubic feet per second. And as long as it's going backwards, it's rising. So hopefully that, you know, rain will slow down and won't cause that river to continue to go up. So Donald, you have some thoughts about, you know, one of the things we look at the Baycatambla, one of the obvious things we'd like to look at, and I don't know if this will ever happen, but they already have some small gates from Baycatambla into Henderson.
True, they do.
Grammy Canal, and they're 5 8-foot gates, so you roughly, if you got 10 feet in height capacity, and that's roughly what the openings are, you have 400 feet capacity, and the Baycatambla at that point is 4,000 feet, so you got 10% of the capacity. And then the possibility of if you put a drain into the swamp, and this is what the elevation was during the flood of 2016. The water at Washington was 32.8 feet, and the water in Pelba was 12.4. So you had, 20-foot head. And had the levee not been there during that event, you wouldn't have had the flood coming down the Teche Vermilion that we had.
That's what, yeah, there's an, of course,
And so if we could put a gate, and just in the same capacity that nature gave that region historically, allow the Catawba to flow. And then the Bar Pit Canal, that's another alternative. If your water is too high in the basin, which at times that could be, of course, as one hydrologist pointed out, if the water's high in the basin, you can close the gates to the water inflowing into the basin and lower it real quick. So there is some control over that. But, even during the flood of 2011, the highest the water got in Henderson was 22.5. And still the water in Catawba was 32. You still had a lot of capacity. You can move the world with a 1-foot head, so with a 10-foot head, even during our most recent last flood. So, and then to put a gate through the dams, there are 3 dams now that close Catawba into the Bar Pit Canal. And there again, anytime you would do something like that, you want to dump a flood on St. Mary Parish, Iberia Parish. So,
That's what the parish presidents are looking at very closely.
Well, sure.
Right?
I mean, yeah, and a good reason for cooperation.
Correct.
That they well realize that you can't take Lafayette's flood and dump it into St. Martin Parish. And I think they think that's what's happening now. They're convinced because the buy is going backwards. But so that would give you management tools. And any time you'd have to have a flood control plan that allows people to make a decision of when they can turn the water down into the Lake Foss Point system or into the basin. But that's where your organization, the Teche Vermilion Freshwater District, could play a major role, because you're already there in the immediate area. You're already operating gates. You already have the personnel. And so it may be a major improvement. And those control systems could be not only for flood, but water quality enhancement in the whole system. Better water quality, fresh water distribution. At times, you wouldn't have to pump. You could allow water from Henderson to flow into Catawba.
That doesn't happen very often.
But it does,
could,
yeah, it could. And so you'd want the gates to operate both ways, but it could. And, but you could always send more water down Lake Foss Point system. And that area probably generally has pretty good water quality because it's big open lakes that tend to have excellent oxygen and restoration during high wind periods. So water quality testing in that system is usually much better in Lake Foss Point than it is over on the other side behind the levee. For whatever reason, I think it's still very much subject to tidal exchange and very much impacted by wave action that restores oxygen during high wind periods. And
well, the district is monitoring the meetings that the parish presidents are having. We're attending those meetings and expressing our support to them. And the plan that is eventually developed, we would certainly want to participate in developing that plan and to also be part of, if possible, to be part of the solution.
Sure. And it's great that the Acadiana Economic Development folks realize that, they already have an organization in place that pull all these parishes together. And you got a very willing group of leaders with these parishes and well recognized by the governor and FEMA in the fact that they've put about $30 million into this effort. And I don't know exactly all the steps that have to be taken to access that $30 million, but that's the available part. And, to learn how the whole system works, where the water went during this flood, where it didn't go. And you could look at New Iberia, flood stage at New Iberia is 9 foot above sea level, and it during this flood didn't get anywhere close to it. Closest it got was 5.8. And so it's, by looking at the data that we do have, and we certainly probably need field information, because, like for instance, the depth of the Vermilion is not going to show up on a gauge. Somebody's going to have to go measure it. And it's going to have to be someone beyond a little depth recorder that you use to go bass fishing, or a bamboo pole. Engineers will have to measure, and they measure, that's the way they do that. They measure all the way across, so make sure that that some hill has developed, sandbar developed in the middle and has made a big, deep gouge on the side. Those issues have to be well engineered. You on air? Can we help you?
Yes, I would like to ask Mr. Sagrera a question. Could he elaborate on exactly how the Teche Vermilion District would be involved in the future remediation of these flooding issues?
I could
And
not.
I appreciate it.
The only thing that I could say is that we want to, and I don't think anyone knows what the solution is. The parish presidents are working toward that solution, but I cannot visualize what it would be, but if it would be something that the district could do to be helpful, we would want to do that. So
Are you having input into the process?
We have been really the input in the sense that we are meeting with them. We answer whatever questions they have about our operations. We have explained to them exactly how we operate. We have brought maps and showed how we distribute water throughout the watershed. So it's more, at this point, it's making sure that they are familiar with what it is that we do.
And they currently operate the gates and a pumping system, and they monitor gauge stations throughout the Teche Vermilion system. So they somewhat have their feet in the water. A lot of what you would use to model a solution will come from their history and their data.
Well, Mr. Sagrera, of what you've seen so far about the plan, does the district, or you or the district itself, approve of these plans? You think they have some good ideas?
They haven't got that far.
No,
There is no plan right now.
Absolutely no plan. There's some ideas out there, but there's no plan currently. I think you're going to have to get a thorough analysis of this watershed, its history and how it was changed with the levee system. One of the generals in Vicksburg said it very well, that when the levee system was built, the Corps left to a future date planning how local floods would be managed. And since 1935, when the levees were complete, they didn't deal with issues like the Keystone Dam and a bunch of other issues that make flood control really tough for us. Had the Bayou-Catawba been functioning through the levees as it was historically, we'd have had a minimal flood in this system, by my estimation.
Well, Mr. Sagrera, from what you've heard so far, do you feel like there's hope to solve this problem?
Yes, I definitely think. I think there is certainly to make progress. The rain like we had last August is certainly something that I don't think anyone could expect to completely solve the flooding that took place then. But anything, even if something can be done to help a lesser rain, I think we need to do that. So it's going to be very complicated. There's a lot of factors that need to be considered, and a lot of things that are not always the same from year to year. For example, the level of the water in the floodway, whenever we had the flood in August, we were able to, or the Corps was able to let water flow into the floodway because the elevation was low. If that would have happened in 2011, when the floodway was full, because of the opening of the Morganza floodway, then there would have been any place for all of this water to go. So all of that, in my opinion, is going to have to be entered into a model, and then the model would be used to predict what would happen under certain situations, and then from there, the plan would be developed.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest, and the interest was well shown by the all-day event that the Acadiana planning people put together, and also the one UL put together. The UL function, I don't know if you attended both of them, I
Yes.
think. And, the event put on by the Acadiana planning was completely sold out, and they had 2 rooms full of people who were watching by remote television and so forth what was going on in the proceedings. So I think you're seeing coastal restoration people want to be involved. You on the air? Can we help you?
Yes, I'd like to try to follow up a little bit on some of the ideas that were broached by the previous caller. And from just the short amount of time that I've been watching here, it sort of sounds like there's a couple of things that would be things that could be done fairly quickly without a whole lot of additional study. Real quickly, like the idea of the gates at Bayou Catawba, if they could either make those gates bigger or put more gates in, it seems like, and I may be wrong, but it seems like that perhaps that would have alleviated some of the problems we had in August. And the second one, I think that seems kind of like a no-brainer to me, and I've heard it from some fairly smart people, one of whom is on TV right there. But anyway, would be to dredge the Vermilion River where at points where it's only 2 feet deep. I mean, I live in Bendel Gardens, and today I went out during one of the heavier periods of rain and drove over the Vermilion River at the Pinhook Bridge, and I don't know if it was flowing backwards, but it sure wasn't flowing forwards. So what do you guys think about those 2 things as ideas that could be done rather quickly?
I think that has merit in to convince the Corps, and the Corps will play a major role in this, and maybe Donald can put in his 2 cents on this. We're looking at the numbers in the last couple of hours. The Vermilion with this rain event at 3 o'clock went up almost 4 feet. It is right at flood stage. It went from 6 to 9.9 feet in an hour. And at the same time, its flow before the rain event was right at 1,000 cubic feet per second south. After the rain event, it's over 3,000 cubic feet backwards, going north. And so dredging the bayou, it would be, I think, is a major issue in this. You have a section that's half a mile is 2 feet deep right near where you live, right downstream from Bendel Gardens. And then you go upstream 1,200 feet to just below the Pinnock Bridge, and it goes to 24 feet. And so that's quite a backward slope. I think that's playing a major role in causing that water to go backwards. And to dredge that half a mile, if you dredge it 10 by 100, you're at about 90,000 cubic yards at $10 a yard. You're less than $1 million. And I think that's a major issue immediately, and that could be done, as you say, that's a no-brainer. That could be done immediately. And I think the biocatobla needs to be dealt with on an emergency basis. I think the original plan of the Corps was to drain it into, the biocatobla would drain down the bar pit into Lake Falls Point. That doesn't happen anymore. There is a very small drain into that, but I think it's only about 4 or 5 feet. It's a drain, and during the flood, the difference between the bar pit canal and Catawba, as measured by 2 engineers and myself, was 16.1 feet. So there is an opportunity to vacate that water into Lake Falls Point, Lake Dotree, which is a very large watershed that was left behind that wasn't in the levee system, that I think was left behind to deal with the local flooding. And to accommodate that, they also built the Sharonton Canal, which is a very large waterway, and it's straight 5-mile shot from the Bayou Teche to Cote Blanche Bay. So absolutely, I think some things could be done very, very quickly. And I don't know if it'll be that obvious to a computer model set up, but I think time is of essence. And I think what's happening in this current rain event that flooded Houston, that could have been here. And you know, so if dredging the Vermilion will lower the stages, if vacating the water out of Cypress Island Swamp, both of those things are very inexpensive solutions. Both of those can have a big effect on lowering stages in the entire Vermilion watershed. So hopefully we can get people to recognize that and make that happen. And Donald might have some comments along that.
I do have a comment concerning the Catawba structure. And I think there's something that needs to be looked at, and someone may be looking at it already, is once the water gets through this Bayou Catawba structure into the floodway, then it needs to travel in the floodway. It needs to travel south and not build up on the inside of the floodway. There has been some reports that there are some restrictions to that water once it gets into the floodway. So looking at ways to speed up the water from getting, once it gets through the Bayou Catawba structure, I think would be another short-term improvement that could be made if indeed it's found that there is some blockage within the floodway.
Mr. Sagrera, have any studies been done on the cost of those things, increasing the capacity of the floodgates and speeding up the water through the floodway? And you know, I know Mr. Schoeffler pointed out that you could pretty much dredge the Vermilion for about $900,000. Do you have any cost estimates on the Bayou Catawba floodgates project, or that secondary thing about making the water flow better through the floodway?
All of those things would be projects that the Corps of Engineers would have to undertake. The floodgates are theirs, and therefore I guess any improvement to them, the whole levee system is managed by the Corps. So I don't know of any study that's been done as to the cost. The first thing that would have to be done would be to determine if that would be a feasible alternative or a feasible thing to do to solve the problem. So that's the part where the study would have to come in.
But when you talk about the money, according to the FEMA reports, damaged homes that they paid for, and they figured this was about half of the homes, and a lot of them had insurance and were not paid for under the FEMA program. Their figures showed that they spent $357 million. And of the homes that they helped, 40% of them had less than a foot of water. So,
yeah.
You know, when you look at those numbers, that's an awful lot of money could have been saved and a lot of misery saved. And they're just dealing with homes. They're not counting things like businesses or farm crops or hay crops that are lost in this event. you could
But,
double or
Mr.
triple
Chairman-
that figure.
Yeah, but even those homes that I don't live in a flood zone, but I had flood insurance, and I would say, and of course my neighbors were probably about, I'd say 15 or 20 homes along Beverly Drive that flooded, and maybe a few less, but at least 15. And my guess from talking to the people right around me, you don't ask people about that, the people that volunteered. About half of them had flood insurance, about half didn't. But flood insurance is highly subsidized by the federal government. I mean,
Absolutely.
you can get $350,000 worth of insurance for $450. So that's still a cost to FEMA, because FEMA is the one that administers the National Flood Insurance Program. So I'm agreeing with you, but adding on to what you're saying, the cost didn't just go away because
Right.
these people were insured. It still had to be footed by the taxpayer and by FEMA. So
Yeah.
you could, I don't know if you could double it, or I mean, probably a lot of people didn't have flood insurance, but the incremental cost that added on from flood insurance is also pretty high. So
Sure.
it would seem that the price of these fixes would almost intuitively be far less than an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure in this situation, I think.
And I think that's what the governor has recognized, that, our area has, 8, 9 parishes, 10 parishes pulling together, looking for a fix, and they're all cooperating. And
Yeah.
he's not getting that kind of cooperation in Livingston and East Baton Rouge and over in the Washita system. So credit to our political leaders that they are cooperating, because it's made a big difference of where the money's going to go and where the effort is going to be focused. And it's a whole new concept. FEMA, that, for one time in the country, somebody's saying, instead of raising the houses and so forth, let's look at the possibility of lowering water levels. So how much, if you lower the water levels in your area by 4 feet, would your home have flooded?
No,
And
I had about a little less than a foot.
you see,
So,
and there's a lot of people in your category, but even 6 inches really wrecks a home.
Oh yeah, you might as well have 4 feet because that's how far you got to go up with the sheetrock.
Sure,
So.
sure.
Well,
So
I
thank
think
you.
it's really great, all the ideas you guys have, and I just want to
And it's
encourage you to just keep pushing hard and start doing some things, because like you said, we're playing Russian roulette, but we're just waiting.
Sure.
We got to start doing something. So
we with you completely, and there's intense public interest, yours being part of it, at these various meetings that were held. 2 of them you all put together, and one by the Acadian Economic Development. Enormous outpouring of public folks with interest in resolving this. The coastal restoration people, the FEMA people, all the state agencies group, and all the parish officials. A lot of us parishes had their entire police jury and councils there at those meetings. So there is very intense public pressure and interest in resolving this. So thank you for your support.
Because literally, it's a major life decisions are going to be made based on whether or not this problem can be addressed. I mean, if I flood again, I don't know if I'm going to live here anymore. And I love living here. I've lived here for 30 years. I moved here when I was 30 years old, and I'm 63 now. And but I'm going to move. I could be gone if it happens again, because you just can't deal with that on a
and a lot of people are gone just with one-time flooding, and I've heard that comment that you made just now by many people. If it floods again, I'm gone. I'm going to move to somewhere else where it ain't never going to flood again. So.
I don't know if I could do it, but.
Well, that.
But I bet they're not going to Houston.
No, I'm going to go someplace where there's less concrete.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, that comment about leaving the area was very familiar for me, because we had the unfortunate flooding in Hurricane Rita and Ike, and a lot of people, and myself included.
How many vacant homes between Abbeville and Intercoastal City and all in the countryside? Beautiful homes that have been vacated and been gone. Those people aren't coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
And
hard
and for
thing.
Corn Island?
It's a hard thing to do, but then home is home, so a lot of them drifted back, myself one.
Did
And,
you raise your
yeah,
house?
I did. We
Yeah,
elevated
right,
the house,
elevated,
and
yeah.
we also have a small house in Lafayette, which is where we were going to live, and then we went, home kept calling, so we ended up living back where
Yeah,
we
you live in a
flooded.
pretty beautiful part of,
Yeah.
of Louisiana. That Big Woods area is beautiful, and the owls hoot at night, and frogs are there, and it's a
Correct.
beautiful area, so.
I might just add before we run out of time, about the symposium that the Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association is having at Vermilionville on September 8th.
Oh, great,
Next
yeah.
Friday.
Yeah, I'm glad you
And-
mentioned that, and that kind of brings us to our close. September 8th at Bayou Vermilion
Correct.
District?
And if, for more information, they can just go to the website, the Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association website,
Great.
and they can get all the information on the symposium. But there will be a couple of speakers there.
Thank you, Donald, for being
It's in-
here. We write it in of our.
Okay,
So thank you so much. Thank everybody for calling in.
thanks, everybody, for
Thank you.
your interest.